Sean Hook's Newsmaker Saturday starts now.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Saturday. Happy New Year, first of all, and we thought we'd start off the new year with a bang, with the 23rd governor of the state of Arizona, Doug Ducey, kind enough to be part of the program. Governor, thank you for doing this. We appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, John. Good to see you as well, and looking forward to visiting with you.
Okay. Governor, let's start with COVID. We've got another spike. We've had these waves come through, and you've been there through all of it. Where are we right now as a state, and what is our plan of attack?
Well, we are experiencing a wave here. This isn't our first wave. I think people know what to do. They know what the answer is. I'm hopeful that people will get the vaccine, will consider the vaccine. And if you're in doubt, you should talk to your family physician or who you would talk to if someone, God forbid, in your family has gotten sick in the past or would get sick in the future. Ask their advice and follow that protocol.
Governor, would you say that, I mean, a lot of what you have said about vaccines and masks, you are saying you are not opposed to vaccines or masks. You're opposed to mandates for vaccines and masks. Explain.
Well, I would actually say I'm pro-vaccine, but I'm anti-mandate. I mean, we live in a free country. People have hesitancy for personal reasons and for reasons beyond that. I want them to be able to get their questions answered and to make the decision that is right for them. I've tried to get all the facts out. We've invested a lot of money. We were the first state to have the 24/7 vaccination centers. The vaccine is free, it's safe, it's effective. I don't know that there's a better deal than that, but what I'm saying is I don't think people want to hear anymore from folks in elected office or talking heads back from Washington, D.C. They should talk with their personal physician, and they should do the right thing.
Do you think we're kind of maxed out on the vaccine in terms of the people who will take it? In other words, we've had this around for a year now. The people who are not taking it are obviously making a conscious choice not to, for whatever reason. Do you think there's any way to compel those people to get this vaccine?
Well, unfortunately, I think politics have crept into the vaccine discussion. We did a lot of survey work in January, and 87% of Arizona was open-minded to getting the vaccine. It was just a question of when. I think what we want to do is make sure that subject matter experts, people like Dr. Richard Carmona, who's leading my vaccine distribution charge in Arizona. He's a former Surgeon General of the United States. He's an Arizona resident. He's a top doc and professor at the U of A. He's out there, and we're vaccinating people every day, but we want people to get the right information and make the right decision.
Governor, with the governor's conference that you're part of, I don't know how much time you spend with other governors from the other party. Do you know Jared Polis, the Democrat from Colorado?
Oh, you bet I do. We have a national governors association, and governors are pretty collegial with each other. If there's a wildfire in Colorado, you can bet our brave women and men are headed over there, and vice versa. So you certainly get to know the other governors and the neighboring governors especially.
Okay, the reason I bring up Governor Polis in Colorado, he's a Democrat. He declared in a new interview that the COVID-19 emergency, in his words, is over. He said that he will not be implementing another statewide mask mandate in response to the spread of Omicron, explaining that if people aren't vaccinated at this point, it's their own darn fault, end quote. Is that basically where you're at?
Well, I would say it differently. First, we've never had a statewide mandate here in Arizona. Every governor had to make difficult decisions along the way. I certainly do not want to shame anyone for the decision they're making. I've never seen anyone insult somebody to come over to their position. What I want to do is get the facts out there. The entire time, John, I've been trying to prioritize lives and livelihoods while protecting people's liberties. And I think that was the right course for the state of Arizona. I think if you look at where we are from a public health perspective, an educational perspective, a social well-being perspective, and an economic perspective, you'll see that we did a pretty good job of balancing this. But COVID has been a challenge for every governor, every citizen in every state across the country. There's no winning COVID. What you want to do is make the most responsible decision during COVID.
I wonder now if there was any kind of push to try to lock people down, what would happen? I mean, what do you think would happen in Arizona if there were another push? And I know it won't come from you, but if people were starting to say, we need to lock down again, do you think we're beyond that just people will not go along?
We didn't lock down in Arizona. People were terrific when the White House had the 15 days to slow the spread, and I know that grew into 30 days, but that was at the beginning of the pandemic. And in Arizona, we had a request to stay home, stay healthy, stay connected. But as we understood the virus, as we knew that the facts were it would affect people 65 years and older with underlying health conditions, we could make better decisions that were more targeted. We stayed largely open here in the state of Arizona. People are flocking here. There's not going to be any lockdown in the state of Arizona. There's not going to be any federal lockdown. And I think that governors have to listen to their citizens. You want to listen to public health experts, but you want to have experts on tap. You don't want to have them on top. You were elected for a reason as the chief executive officer of your state, and I'm going to continue to be energetic and make the best possible decisions, giving the information that I have in real time.
Was it wrong to lock down schools, to send kids home for remote learning?
Well, John, the fact of the matter is kids were not going to schools at the beginning of the pandemic. As we got past the point where we had the facts and knew what was safe and what wasn't safe, many of our schools were open and remained open. Some of the schools just refused at that time. I think we're going to be able to address some of these things in legislation. So I want to see parents and families in charge of their child's education. And I don't think that bureaucrats should be able to make decisions with no accountability that really affects a kid's social well-being, affects where they're doing in math, reading, and science. We do have some catching up to do.
Will Humble, who's been on the program quite a bit, the former state health director, he said that you should require that state and university employees get vaccinated, impose a statewide indoor mask mandate for public places, and require proof of vaccination to go to bars, restaurants, and nightclubs. I take it you don't agree.
Will Humble should live in another state other than Arizona. I listen to medical doctors. I've been fortunate enough to have a medical doctor, an infectious disease epidemiologist who's led my Department of Health Services. That's in Dr. Kara Christ. And we're not going to be following any of that guidance. That sounds much more to me like New York City or Oregon or Washington State.
I want to pivot here for a moment to the election audit, the 2020 election. That put every politician in a real bind to try to kind of figure out whose side they were going to be on this thing. When it came to Donald Trump, who was really pushing people in Arizona to try to get a recount, try to do this, try to do that, try to thwart the election results and hold it up to have it looked at, what was your relationship with him then, and what is it now?
Well, I had an excellent relationship with the administration. We worked very closely together with both President Trump and Vice President Pence. I'm very proud of what we were able to accomplish together in the state of Arizona. I, of course, worked very hard for the re-election of the president and vice president, but after Election Day, after 3 audits, after all 15 counties had certified the election and deemed it accurate, it was sent to the State House for certification. If there is an irregularity or there's something that went wrong and you want to bring suit and you have evidence, you don't have standing until the election is certified. I certified the election, and then the rest was left to the judicial process, and you see where we are right now. So that's been the situation. I have had conversations since Election Day and since certification, but I'm going to keep those conversations in confidence.
Are you and Donald Trump at all friends at this point?
Well, I would say if we were going to talk about policies and think, yes, he's been very critical post-certification. That's politics.
Is he still the leader of the Republican Party in your view, or is this party pivoting?
Well, listen, when you are a former president and there hasn't been a primary for the next president, you're still the standard bearer. So yes, he is still the leader of the Republican Party, but there's many leaders inside the Republican Party. I think the MAGA, America First, 2016 to 2020 agenda is something that mostly every Republican and every conservative embraced. What we're looking at right now, of course, is a victory in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin as the new governor there. We're going to have 36 governor races across the country. We've got the House of Representatives and the Senate coming up in this cycle as well. We shouldn't be thinking about the next presidential race. We should be thinking about the agenda we're going to pass in the state of Arizona that will set up our legislators for success. Let's have a good 2022, and then we can start talking about 2024.
Will you endorse someone out of the Republican Party before this primary? Will you actually weigh in?
Well, listen, as the chairman of the Republican Governors Association, you traditionally do not get involved in primaries. There's 36 governors races in this next year, but I'm going to reserve the right to potentially get involved in one primary. I'm going to care very much about who my successor is, so I'm going to be listening to what these candidates say. I want to cement the successes that we've had. I've got 380 days left in office. We've got a full legislative session left. I want to make sure that the tax cuts remain in place. We've low tax, light regulation, being inviting state to business, and that we're going to remain a state that respects our cops and public safety. And if people want to embrace that, I may be able to help them. If they want to work against this or have a model of a New York State, California, Michigan, Oregon, or Washington State, that's not welcome in the state of Arizona. We're going to keep Arizona, Arizona.
What would be your best advice for your successor? What you've learned over these past 7 years that you would say, listen, let me tell you about this. You need to know this. What would you tell them?
Well, I would say first and foremost, you need to get out among the people. You need to be running for the right reasons. You need to know why you are going to run. You want to run to do something, not to be somebody. So share with people what your plan is, what your priorities are, get in the rooms, make the case, and no matter who you are, whether your background's as a private sector CEO or state treasurer, there's a learning curve when you come into the governor's office. It's a big job with a lot of opportunity to help and improve people's lives, but you've got to win that race. You have to win the primary. You have to win the general election. This is our system. I embrace it, and it's early. It's still, we're heading right into 2022 right now, and it's going to be a spirited primary on both sides. May the best candidate win, but I want to see the best leader be the next governor of the state of Arizona.
Let me just quickly ask you about January 6th. You watched that as all of us did that day. That became kind of a turning point for a lot of people. Even supporters of Donald Trump who watched that, I think it took a lot of folks back who said, wait a minute, what is going on? How did you view that day, and do you think any Arizona lawmakers are culpable for what happened that day? Do you think the president, former president, is culpable for what happened that day?
I spoke about January 6th in my State of the State, and I'm going to stand by those statements. I denounced violence or vandalism at the People's House. I don't think it should ever happen or ever happen again. I think the people that conducted that violence should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I believed that then. I believe that today. I think that riots in public are wrong, whether they're happening in inner city Baltimore or Portland or Washington, D.C. So this is not how we move the needle in terms of public policy in the United States. Let's the investigation take place, and we can determine who's accountable for this. But I know there were many good people that went back to peaceably assemble, to make their feelings known, but there's a percentage of those folks that then went to the Capitol. And it was the people that conducted what happened at the Capitol. Those are the ones that should ultimately be held accountable for their behavior.
We're back with Arizona Governor Doug Ducey. In a moment, we continue our conversation right after this. Welcome back to Newsmaker Saturday, rejoined again by Arizona Governor Doug Ducey. Let's talk about the border for a minute. You've been down there. You've worked the National Guard into this. DPS has a role in the border. We've had almost 2 million interactions on the border this year. That's a record. That's a 40-year record. It's never been higher. What is going on, and what is happening? I mean, people are watching this, and I think there are a lot of folks who are saying, nobody's doing anything.
Well, John, that's not accurate. The state of Arizona is doing a lot. And I've worked with 3 presidents now, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. The Biden administration is far and away the worst. Kamala Harris is the border czar. She's not been to Arizona or to our border. I've been to the border more times than I can count. We can't get Secretary Mayorkas down there. We can't get him to return a phone call or a letter. So it's the Border Strike Force that is funded by the Department of Public Safety in Arizona and led by Heston Silbert, and it's the Arizona National Guard led by our Adjutant General Kerry Muhlenbeck that are down at the border. We're surging badges to the border to support Yuma Police Force, to support Leon Wilmot, who's the Yuma Border County Sheriff, and we're helping the men and women that have remained from ICE and CBP and the Border Agency. But the Biden administration has reduced the number of resources that are there. And even though I believe we're now, after a couple weeks, getting Arizona's border under control, and that'll mean good things for Yuma and the state of Arizona, it's like squeezing a balloon, John. When you get our border protected, they head right over to New Mexico or California, where they don't have the National Guard deployed. That's only in Arizona and Texas. So we need Joe Biden to either resign along with Secretary Mayorkas, or we need him to do his day job. And the other thing we need is our federal delegation, who's talking about passing a lot of different legislation back in Washington, D.C., to not be a yes on anything until it has specific language to secure our border in Arizona. We know it can be done. It was done under the Trump-Pence administration. Joe Biden can do it with the stroke of a pen. We sent him 10 policy prescriptions to secure that border. We need some attention, and we need some action, and we need our congressional delegation and senators to act. We can't wait.
Governor, there are legitimate, I'm sure, human rights claims for people coming across the border. But the big majority, if you talk to folks who are on the border, the big majority are coming here for economic reasons. Can you tell me, cut through all the stuff going on, why the feds don't seem to want to slow this down or stop it? It's as if we're just kind of letting it happen, and I'm wondering what the reason is. Do you know?
Well, the Biden administration is AWOL, and they are anti-wall. If you remember in the first Democratic primary debate, it was a yes or no question. Raise your hand. Would you offer free health care to people that come across the border illegally? Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and every other candidate on that stage raised their hand. They basically invited this illegal immigration. And this isn't illegal immigration. This is a mass migration of illegal migrants, and the cartels are taking advantage of people and causing a humanitarian crisis for people that would love to live in a better place, but they're using it so they can have a diversionary tactic so they can get this fentanyl across the border. And now the number one cause of death in America, the number one cause of death in Pima County among people under the age of 21 are these fentanyl overdoses. This is a direct linkage back to the Biden administration and their policies. I have no idea why they would want to do this. The first role of the chief executive, of the commander-in-chief, is to protect and defend our nation. Joe Biden has no attention to that or to public safety. It's not only hurting the border states. This fentanyl is coming from Arizona and going to places like Omaha, Nebraska, and Little Rock, Arkansas, and Toledo, Ohio. And you've got high school, college kids, and adults that are overdosing on this dangerous poison. So it's beyond time for the Biden administration to act, to do the right thing, to protect the citizens of Arizona and America.
Is this a role that the state should be involved in, or are you left with no other choice?
There is no other choice than for the state to act. Now, the state is always happy, and I'm going to tell you, Barack Obama deployed the National Guard to the border. Of course, Donald Trump deployed the National Guard to the border. Jerry Brown in California, along with myself, deployed the National Guard to the border under Donald Trump because he saw that there was a crisis. This is a complete ignoring of the problem. Can you believe that somebody in top federal office has not been to the border in the worst border crisis that we've had in decades, John? The border's always been a state issue in Arizona, but since 2016, it's been a national issue, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris simply do not want to be bothered with it.
Governor, when you came into office, one of the things that I think was in your back pocket that you really wanted to do was get rid of the state income tax. You're getting there. I mean, you made progress, I guess, but is that the way to go?
Well, look at Arizona's economy right now. I mean, we're absolutely booming. We're going to add 700,000 jobs before the end of the decade. Our economy's been completely transformed. We were known for construction in call centers not that long ago. Today, we've got electric cars, semiconductors, high-tech, high-paying jobs. Of course, the great hospitality and service sector that we've always had. So I think we're in a terrific position as a state, and I want to see us continue to grow as a state because this provides opportunity for all of our citizens, John, and it's something that allows us, it gives us the ability to protect people. We've got the lowest flat tax in the country right now at 2.5%. It was the largest tax decrease in Arizona state history, and we still have a general fund that's overflowing with tax dollars because we have more taxpayers. We have more people working today than ever in the history of Arizona. I think we all knew we were in for a boom year. I believe we're in for a boom decade, and I want to make sure that we grow responsibly going forward. And I'm going to pay special attention to that over this next legislative session.
If you weren't term limited, would you want to keep going? Would you want another term as governor?
I do believe in term limits in the executive branch, and I think 8 years is plenty. So I don't have to have that hypothetical a challenge if I go for another term. I knew it would be 2 years or 2 terms. I think 2 terms make sense. 8 years is a lot of time, and I've enjoyed this very much. And I've got 380 days left, and I intend to work hard every single day to finish strong and to run through the tape.
People ask, why are you not challenging Mark Kelly for U.S. Senate?
I'm focused on being governor. This is the job that I wanted, John. You know me. I come from the private sector. I come from the private sector. I wanted to be a chief executive officer in state government. I signed up. I was asked by my peers to lead the Republican Governors Association. We had a smash mouth victory with Glenn Youngkin in Virginia in 2021. There's 36 governor's races in 2022. My plate is full.
Some people think you may run for president with the idea that, you know, you may end up getting VP or a cabinet position. Any truth to that?
I'm 100% focused on being governor, John.
I'm not going to get.
I mean, that is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Well, you got to give me some credit for trying at least, Governor. Thank you.
Thank you, John. You got a job, and I do as well. But of course, I always enjoy visiting with you.
Likewise.
Next time, I want it to be in the studio. Okay. All right.
We'll see if we can do that. I'll talk to management. Governor Doug Ducey, thank you very much.
John.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
And best of luck. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Governor. Back in a moment on Newsmaker Saturday.